Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on the time zone you are in. Okay, so for the benefit of the audience, if all of you could raise your hand, just say your name for the benefit, so people can attach a name to the face. So in no particular order, Cyril.
I'm Cyril. Hello, everyone.
All right, Raghav.
Hi.
Hey. Hi, Amit.
Hello. Hi, this is Amit.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, everybody. Looking forward to talking to you today.
Awesome. To tell the truth, I'm extremely excited for this panel discussion. I'll tell you the reason why I am. Each one of you has not only transformed the business of your organization where you're part of it, but more importantly, you also help transform the business of your organization's customers and help them. So that's something which is extremely exciting to take some nuggets and key takeaways. And for the benefit of the audience, our topic for discussion today is about how do we redefine enterprise R&D strategies and the impact of digital engineering, what you need to do to ensure a future-proof growth. So we'll dwell directly into that. Just an icebreaker question. I'll go around the room asking the question to each one of you. All of you play such a critical role in your organizations. What is that one thing you would like to be remembered for within your organization, let's say a few years down the line? That is the one thing, that impact you created in the organization. Amit, you like to go first?
That's a very hard icebreaker, I would say. But very simply put, look, as far as healthcare is concerned, there are major challenges, right? And providing access to more and more patients, reducing costs, giving better outcomes to patients. And look, while no one person or no one company can really solve all of that, one just hopes that the work that we are doing today, when you look back 5-7 years down the line, you can say, well, I made some difference to that, even in a small way. Every drop will count, but I think that's what I would like to be remembered for. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. Over to you, Cyril.
Yeah, so indeed, that's a very challenging icebreaker question. But I would say what for me is very important is, are we able to solve real important customer problems, leveraging the best of technology, and not speeding technology around, hoping that they will ultimately solve some kind of problems. And in our industrial automation context at Rockwell Automation, it means helping our customers solve their efficiency and sustainability challenges.
Makes perfect sense. Ian?
I think similar answer. I agree. It's a challenging question, but I think we are at the forefront and cutting edge of a lot of these technologies, and obviously the promise is huge. But I think delivering on the value, and we are an enabler at PTC to a lot of the customer initiatives that Amit and people like that are rolling out that really are changing the world. And so I'd love to look back 5 to 7 years from now and think about how we delivered on the value and the promise of all these technologies.
Got you. Makes sense. Raghav?
Yeah, Ajay, from my perspective, actually, as a services company, if you're able to, the world is really moving fast. Technology is moving that fast. So if the organization can help them to really move a little faster than what it is, from the value additions that the services company bring in, I think that is what I see as the difference that we make to the customer. And that's what the differentiation I would look at from the TechM perspective.
Got you. No, makes sense. See, each one of you had a very interesting perspective to respond to that question. But ultimately, if I could summarize what I could read, a common theme was all, how do you at the end of it add value to the customer? That's what you want to create an impact, which is there. So, but I do agree with some of you said, Amit, you started saying this is a hard, challenging, ice-breaking question. But so be it. Okay, so switching gears, and we have seen, Amit, we'll start with you. We've seen G Healthcare, Edison platform, has been a great success, creating a tremendous impact in the market space, which is there. However, it is also said that everyone is smarter in the hindsight. So given a choice today, if you were to restart building this Edison platform, what will be the top couple of things which you like to do something very differently?
Yeah, Jay, look, I think you said it right. I mean, hindsight 2020, as they say, right? So, but we always learn, right? So we, as we go through any journey, when you look back, there are significant learnings. It has been the same as far as the Edison platform is concerned. Look, if I had to now look back and say, okay, what if I had to restart this all over again? How would I approach it? I would say that I will push on the fundamentals even stronger. Okay. Do we have the right architecture? Is that, have we taken care of scalability? Is it really an API first design? Have we considered deployment flexibility, cloud as well as on-prem and data centers? What type of services are we really standing up from a platform perspective? Okay. And more importantly, also in parallel, think about monetization and go-to-market strategies and the actual impact that you can create both for yourself as well as the customers. We did a lot of that, but if I have to now restart it, I would say, okay, I will re-emphasize or emphasize more on certain aspects of this, than what we did, when we started the journey about 3 years back.
Got you. Focus on the fundamentals, ensure the foundation is strong enough, and take care of the scalability and all the other elements which you mentioned. Absolutely dot on target, and well said, Amit. Thank you. When you talk about, I'll build on to what Amit you were saying, and maybe I'll move to you, Cyril. I know when you're looking at doing things differently, you spend a lot of time in terms of innovation, and you've seen how to bring the innovation element in terms of with respect to customer experiences across products, platform, business model. So if you could touch a little bit specifically on 2 points which come top of my mind. One is, it is said that imagination is the only weapon in the war with reality. So how do you ensure that the imagination really comes out and the innovation is being made? And the second is, a lot of organizations, at least I've seen, is that the very same reasons which make them so successful today, sometimes could be the hindering blocks for them to really go on the innovation route, because they believe everything going so great. So how do you address that, and how do you bring that balance? Cyril, over to you.
Yeah, so innovation is a very wide topic. I think a lot of the people in the audiences have a lot of personal experience related to innovation. So I've been driving innovation projects in the industrial space for the last 20 years, probably. And I have had some good success and also some failure, and I have learned from those failure. I think what I will retain 2 things in particular that I would like to share. The first thing is that we should always remember that innovation is not just invention and imagination. Ultimately, innovation is about solving a customer problem, creating value with the resolution of that customer problem, and monetizing this so that the value is shared between the person providing the innovation and the company acquiring this innovation. That sounds very simple when I describe it like this, but we should really always think about the full cycle of innovation from ideas to market, and really from ideas to revenue. Not just looking at innovation as an exercise that you do where you invent new things, building from technology. And for me, it's important to take this into account because this changes fundamentally which people should be involved in an innovation process. As an innovation process in a company, for me, is not just about engineering. It's every single function of a company needs to have a way or an angle to contribute to the innovation process. We cannot drive a fundamental great digital innovation to the market if the financial process have not been adjusted, if the IT backend that has been associated is not evolved. And ultimately, what I have often said as a summary is what is very particular in the nature of those new digitally enabled innovation, or the innovation in this new digital world, is that it succeeds because you drive 3 things at the same time. You drive the right technology to solve a problem. You drive the right innovative user experience so that a customer can consume this innovation in the right way. The experience is adapted to the nature of the solution that you bring to the customer, and it has the right business model Because if you have the right business model, then you have the right equation on how to share the value between a customer and the provider of this innovation. And I have learned a lot in those past 20 years from innovators that are on the market that are different from large companies and that have different set of constraints. And usually they have two very interesting constraints that will be considered as very painful by a lot of us: the lack of time and the lack of money. And I think bringing large corporate things that needs to be done faster with less resources, the idea of lean innovation, lean startup, or whatever model you can call it, associating, as I said earlier, the right people, but in a short time frame with limited resources to try to fast track bringing a solution to a problem. This is among the best recipe I have found in my experience. When you do very large, very long project with only technical resources that last multiple years, you seldom deliver an outcome that is a very differentiated, well-monetized innovation.
Oh, very nicely said, Cyril. And you brought up some very interesting points in terms of, and one of the big ticket items which always comes up in people's mind in organization is when you put a innovation proposal in, the question is, before investment, there's a word called return on investments. So putting that together and able to quantify this, that these are the potential benefits you're going to gain out of, sometimes could be very, very tricky. And I think you were alluding and linking it back, saying that as long as you're able to map it to the value you can generate for customers, that's where the kind of trick lies in. Would that be fair to say? Yeah,
but with very one adjustment. It's not like a large project where, like, let's say you do a tunnel or you do something and you want to have a return on investment built for the next 20 years on the project. What is important is to understand the value of the next step. You need to invest to go from an idea to a prototype. Okay, so let's do this. Let's put an amount of money that is reasonable to go from this idea to the prototype. Then from this prototype, we are going to experiment with a certain number of customers, and we are going to invest an incremental amount of money to go to this next step. Because it's only by those iterative and progressive steps that ultimately you will gradually build your business case, validate some of your hypotheses, learn from experimentation and interaction with customers to ultimately reach the point where, yes, you can build a full case business case. But if you want to start innovation only with the certainty that you have all the hypotheses to financially model the success of this innovation, then you are in the trap of large corporations innovation sometime, or the innovator dilemma, because those business case will never be better than the existing business anyway, and will never be experimented. So you need to think really incrementally about exactly like a startup will do in going from seed to Series A to Series B. Every of those steps means that something new, different, needs to be shown to customers. When the first round of investment is done in a startup, it's not the business plan for the next 10 years that is presented. It's a set of hypotheses with a certain level of certainty. And there is no reason why large corporations will not apply similar type of reasoning in their approach to innovation. Gotcha. No, thank you for that. And to both your responses, Cyril and Amit, we already started seeing questions coming up here in the chat window for us. So we'll come and visit them, but thank you. Let's move on. Ian, from your perspective, your organization also plays in a very interesting position in terms of how you really enable the customers to do things in a better way with your engineering products, platform solutions which are there. Now, in your opinion, do you believe in the last few years or so, has technology changed the way engineers look at their work? Is there a view you have onto that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, definitely think there is, and I'll echo some of the comments from Cyril and Amit. I think the key we talk about is this digital transformation concept really doesn't happen in departments. It happens across the enterprise and, in fact, across the ecosystem. And so in order to do that, you have to leverage all this trapped data within enterprises. We talk about digital thread being a way to link together all of the different departments around the enterprise. And you know, this is beyond CAD and PLM. That's an entirely different set of topics. Engineering ultimately creates a ton of very valuable data, both creates that data that could be leveraged elsewhere in the enterprise, but also should be consuming data that's created in manufacturing or in service. And so a great way to think about how do I develop better products is to think about how are those products being used, to study the solutions that are being developed in the field, how customers use those solutions, which features and functions are they using most often, where do failures occur, how do I engineer out failures, how do I look for customers that are using certain features more often, certain features less, certain products more often, certain products less, and then create that multi-directional flow of information, both from engineering out to the field and from customer back into the engineering process. And I think what we're seeing more than anything is our customers starting to think not just about the original equipment sale, but about this total customer lifetime value of the product. And how can I create an ongoing relationship with a customer that allows me to monetize, especially the aftermarket component of longer lived assets. And so that to me is taking the concept of a digital thread, not just thinking about engineering data as it traditionally lives today, but thinking about how do I extend that out both into the field and into a multi-year relationship with customers.
Makes sense. Makes sense. We'll possibly come back and visit some of the pointers you made over here, depending on the time which we have, but interesting pointers. Let's quickly move our perspective and go from a more, so we'll move to Raghav. And Raghav, you've recently taken over this role. And we know that if you look at, there is a huge talent crunch which is there in the market space. And we talk about the new wave on digital engineering. So in your opinion, is the industry doing enough to create talent-ready resources with next wave of digital technologies and the explosion in the requirements which are coming in? Any inputs, thoughts onto that?
Absolutely. I think that's a very interesting question, Ajay, because according to one of the NASSCOM is the industry forum in India, and it says that today's digital demand, whatever that is there, is 8 times the supply. That's what they say, and it's going to be 20 times in the next 5 years. So it means that there's a huge gap in terms of this digital talent. But the important part is it is not just the retaining the digital talent, but also developing the digital talent. So that is one. And the second, why I'm saying this is we need to develop also is because according to one of the IBM study, it says that every 11 to 12 hours, the knowledge doubles, which used to be about 10 to 12 months earlier. It means that it is really, doubling much faster than what people imagine. So you have to be very dynamic, not only learning, but you should be learning continuously, developing continuously. The third is always that the technology knowledge is the one which decays much, much faster. They say that whatever the knowledge that you have today, only 50% of that is going to be useful after a year. So these are the 3 dimensions that we have. One, we have a gap. The second one is the technology knowledge is doubling. And the third one is the decaying of the knowledge. So these are the 3 things that we have to look at and see how we can really skill people who are coming in, and how do we reskill the people. For example, if you look at the automotive industry, right? And the past 100 years, these combustion engines have been the drivetrains. And suddenly there is an electric vehicle comes in. So that is disruptive. So how do we really reskill the people who are really working on it to work on the electric drivetrains? That is something that we need to really look at. And then upskill, because the technology is also getting upgraded. For example, we were moving 3G, 4G, 5G, whatever it is. How do we really upskill the people? So all these things have to be working together to make sure that the digital talent, we really have the right skills to really support the transformation that is happening. At the same time, I'm saying that it's not a huge issue that as it comes up, but at the same time, because the skills are different and the competencies are different. How do we keep the competencies on one side, and how do we really develop the skills on the other side? From India perspective, if you really look at the government's, it's a priority. They are actually really pushing this with a lot of budget allocations, investing in reskilling and also digital skilling in India. And they also give a lot of rebates, tax rebates for the innovation that really happen in these areas. So that is something that is happening. And it's also partnering with the industry forums like NASSCOM or whichever to ensure that they find out what exactly is needed for the industry and how do they really invest in the right places. So that is what the industry, the governments are doing. And the companies like us, TechM or any other company, what they are doing is that they're even establishing software academies inside the organizations to continuously, because it should be a learning organization, it should be continuously upgrading, reskilling, skilling, and also upskilling. So because of that reason, they are setting up these software academies to ensure that it supports not only internal engineers. In fact, TechM even goes outside and says that even the engineers from outside can be trained in those areas. That is what they are doing. And in fact, TechM has a specific reward for people to really come and then upskill themselves so that they can really be useful rather than going outside and bringing those talents. So from that perspective, everything is taken care of? No, not really. Still, there are gaps between the academy and then the industry. But the direction that the whole industry and then the governments are moving is in the right direction. I think probably we'll be able to address as we go forward. And just to say the one last thing, just to say that in India, every year, close to about 250,000 digital talents come out of the university. So I think that is a huge number. We can really, to a large extent, take care of this.
Right. And despite those huge numbers, like you articulated earlier, there's so much of a demand, which is going to explode further. And all the initiatives said seems to be in good direction, but still, we as a team, all of us in the industry really need to pull up our socks to really make those demands actually met and get the robust supply chain. Good. And building onto that, Amit, I know that in your world, you've leveraged a lot of very innovative ways in opening up the platform and using startup ecosystem to fulfill those talent crunch. Would you like to share some light onto that for the benefit of all of us?
Sure. No, I think, Raghav made some really good comments here about talent availability itself. But, look, when you look at the industry today, in fact, if you look at any vertical, the problems are pretty complex, right? And there is no one company, no one person that can actually solve everything. And ecosystems are becoming more and more important, right? I think, it's our realization too at GE Healthcare. So when we started on this Edison journey, we were very clear right up front that whatever we develop, we're going to open up the platform, right? And we will create, sort of ecosystems around it. We have accelerators going, right now we have an accelerator in China, we have an accelerator in Europe. We also have an accelerator in India. We are onboarding on almost 20, 25 companies here in the US on the platform. And what we realize is that if you do that well, it really accelerates the journey, right? Significantly, because every of these startups bring something unique to the table. Obviously the talent itself, but either there may be AI algorithms, there are infrastructure elements, that can be very useful for other companies and so on and so forth. So I think it does create sort of a vibrancy, about the whole development momentum that you can generate if you do this well. And then, the talent aspect of this is very, very important too, because, look, when I look at the healthcare problems today, when you look at data and sort of Ian, sort of mentioned this before, it's really based on the data foundation, right? Everything that we are trying to do is really based on the data foundation. The platform is enabling us to ingest that data, to aggregate the information, and then, support it with multiple services or building blocks, so to say, so that, third-party companies or even within GE Healthcare, we can sort of develop those, consuming applications much more rapidly. Okay. But each of these data elements or data types are pretty involved, right? I mean, if you look at, healthcare, you're talking about imaging information, you're talking about genomic information, you're talking about digital, pathology, you're talking of EMR, more and more now you're talking about social determinants of health being brought together. Now, when you look at a more advanced application, you look at an oncology or a cardiology application, more and more these applications are using multimodal data sets. Okay. Now, each of these data sets are extremely complex in nature, and you can't have expertise in every domain, right? So there are companies which have a lot of know-how and domain knowledge in digital pathology. There are other companies which have great amount of knowledge in the genetic sort of space. There are companies like us. We have been sort of dealing with imaging for a long period of time. Now, before, maybe 10 years before, okay, it was sufficient to have imaging information and build a business around it. Now, the more and more you look at the care pathways are becoming very sort of multimodal in nature. And even for that
Right.
reason, you have to bring together a larger ecosystem, right? Because if you want to really build an effective solution, for oncology, cardiology, neurology, or any of the ologies right now, it is very, very unlikely that a single modality solution will be able to solve the problem that the customers are really looking for. So that's a big driver, by the way, in the industry, that we bring together ecosystems where we can really crack those bigger problems, right, much more effectively. So I think that's our experience. Look, it's been a journey for us, frankly. Working with a lot of companies outside of GE Healthcare. Traditionally, we were a bit different, right? We have done a lot of development internally. As we open up, that's an experience in itself, frankly, and a lot of learning that we have gone through.
And we'll see, time permitting, we'll come and visit some of those pointers which you just mentioned, because some of them are very, very interesting. And in terms of how do you really, it's not about just, one is to think about and implement an ecosystem, but how do you really leverage it to the best advantage? And so those learnings and pointers might be very, very relevant for all of us. But we'll come and see if we can visit back, time permitting. More and more questions have started pouring over here in the chat window, but I will try to drop on my question, and I'll possibly try to pick up, because people over here would be interested to hear response to the questions which are flowing in. And one other element which I want to touch base before I go to these questions which are pouring. Cyril, in your role, you like few weeks old into this role, right? You just taken up the new role, and like we say, drinking from the fire hose. I'm sure you'll be in that mode. Some of the pointers we were discussing around talent crunch being one of them. What we have seen, a lot of times the inorganic growth or the M&A activities also play a very critical role when you actually want to either look at certain capability building or acquiring certain specific areas of competence. Do you have any thoughts around that? Is that something which is of interest? Have you seen that work for you in the past?
Well, I think this contributes to something that for me is extremely important in any innovation approach, is the diversity of talents that we associate to any innovation ideas. You could imagine different extremes. So there was one of you was mentioning in previous discussion, reskilling existing talents in the company. I think it's important. Those people understand the business, understand the context, understand the history. So we are speaking about people that understand the business, and we want to grow their digital skills. On the other extreme of the spectrum, we might want to bring inside the company people that come from a totally different context, maybe digital native companies. They will come with very unique ideas or point of view without knowing the business and the context. And if you acquire companies, you are kind of a little bit in between. You might acquire a company that is in the same problem space as you are. They have looked at the same problem as you are looking at, but found a different solution to that problem, and they will bring unique perspective. For me, the winning recipe is when you are able to build a culture in a company, a culture of innovation that integrates those different perspectives and point of view in a positive way, and not as an opposition, like what I have observed sometimes in some companies around in the market, an opposition between the incumbent teams and the companies that have just been acquired, or a tension between the people coming from outside, from digital native companies, and the people inside the company. So for me, successful culture, successful leadership in the company is about the ability to bring those different people with their unique point of view together to drive the innovation agenda of a company.
Got you. Makes sense. Makes sense, actually. All right. Ian, from your perspective, if I were to check on you, if you look at it, cloud, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all these are becoming ubiquitous. How do you see digital engineering really defining the OEM business models and revenue streams, especially on the business model side? As to any thoughts around that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's amazing how much data is available to us now versus at any time in the past. I thought one of the quotes from one of the earlier presentations was interesting about at any point in time, things are moving faster than ever before. And then he pointed out that the quote was from 2009. I think that's true today. And I think figuring out in a very agile fashion how to take advantage of the data that's available and how to work that into process is critical. And so Cyril talked earlier on about prototyping and about moving quickly, about learning from your failures and moving on, about being able to run multiple prototype efforts and then invest in the ones that pay off. I think that's a great approach to things like machine learning and artificial intelligence as well. We at PTC obviously learn a lot through IoT. We spend a lot of time gathering data on behalf of our customers and helping them establish these data gathering initiatives. I think figuring out what information is most important and not necessarily gathering all of the information, but gathering the most important information and figuring out what that is a critical strategic initiative up front. Otherwise, you just get overwhelmed with data that won't be used. And so figuring out what are the most important pieces of data to gather, how to analyze that, and then use that to predict. And obviously, as the OEM in that scenario, the holy grail here is being able to leverage the entire customer base or the entire fleet of assets to think about what's wrong or what could go wrong for an individual customer. And so we feel like if you can think through how do you apply analytics to the data that's coming in to solve an individual customer's problem based on being able to have visibility to the entire fleet, that's a powerful way to differentiate yourself from other competitors in the market. And so ultimately, it's figuring out what those data strategies are, figuring out how to get them rolled out as quickly as possible, how to be agile and think about what works and what doesn't work, and then invest in the stuff that does. And then think about the payback for those business models. That's the critical piece here.
Got you. So as promised earlier, I think as happens with all healthy discussions, there's so many ideas coming across, so many questions coming up. So I'm putting my questions, which I actually had in plan, aside. But whatever you guys have been saying, there are some questions which are coming out of the chat over here. So let me pull up one of them and see, and it'll be open to all of you, whoever wants to take first and go around onto that. So there is a question which says, and I'm going to combine two questions over here. It says, this is a question to all panelists. So they're looking at a good percentage, which is there, which maybe it might differ from vertical to vertical, but it says, what is a good percentage spent towards R&D as compared to company's total revenue? And the second part to that is when you look at creating budgets in R&D itself for innovation, what that percentage might look like.
I think it probably does vary a lot on industry to industry. You know, from a software perspective, obviously we spend more on R&D probably than our hardware counterparts, and so we spend about 20% of our total turnover annually on software investments in R&D.
Right. Got you.
So maybe I can bring an alternative answer or something a bit more disruptive. I don't think this is the right question to ask ourselves. Because innovation is about value creation. So if you decide that innovation should be a percentage of yourself, you stuck yourself in a box. So you consider that innovation is an expense, not an investment that should create value. And in this approach that I was highlighting earlier, being incremental, you don't need to spend a lot of money to demonstrate the value of an idea. And then when the value of an idea is demonstrated after those initial investments, then this should not be difficult to convince the rest of the organization, like you will convince investor if you are a startup, that you need a certain amount of investment to realize the value of this innovation. So yes, every company needs to fit budget guidelines and everything, including myself. Okay, I'm not saying that they should not be a constraint, but we should not see innovation as a constraint in the sense a budget category in the overall discussion. We should think innovation on the other way around about what potential of value creation do we have. And if you look at the digital space, for I'm sure plenty of you are familiar with the idea of blue ocean. This is about creating value, not capturing the value from somebody else. And most of the companies that have a tremendous increase of their valuation have just done that. They have created new value, not just developed a better product to take the value away from somebody else. So this is for me a very different perspective on investing in innovation.
Point taken. I think you make a good point actually. And like you were saying in the beginning, it is all about, it varies from industry, and Ian pointed towards that. And so it may not be a great idea to say, I'm going to bucket so many dollars or percentage toward innovation quotient for me for this. So point taken over there. Maybe Amit and Raghav, you can take a jive with the next question, which is there. So next question says that how do you quantify and measure the impact of digital engineering investments? And given that this is digital engineering, do you believe the gestation period is getting smaller of realization of the ROI onto it? And is there a need for change in mindset of the leadership? Loaded.
I would prefer Amit to go first because Amit is from the company, because we are a services company. So where we look at investment on digital is completely different from Amit. So I think it's better Amit go. Yeah.
Sure. So look, I think there are 2-3 questions embedded in that one question, right? First of all, look, yes, absolutely. I think the innovation cycles are getting smaller and smaller, right? And your ability to sort of get to market quickly and faster it keeps evolving, right? 6 years back, 5 years back, the timelines that we were talking about at that time, today, basically, you look at it and the times are shrunk significantly. There are many companies, especially in the consumer space, who are releasing software maybe every week or maybe every day, right? At this point in time. But I think the monetization question is very important. And look, I've ran platforms for many years in my career. And it becomes very, very essential that you don't get into a platform for platform journey, right? Where you take 3 years, 5 years, 7 years before the company can start seeing some value out of the platform. Because I'll tell you by experience that your CFO and your CEO will lose patience not more than 24 months from the point you started the journey, for sure, right? So I think the approach that we have taken is we basically said we'll build a platform, but we'll make sure that the first application on the platform and the first revenue comes within 18 months of start. Okay. And I think the way we have done that is make sure that we have a solid architecture in place, but we don't necessarily realize the entire architecture in one go. You actually, sort of piggyback on some of the first business-oriented applications, and then you start realizing your architecture progressively. I think that's very, very important. In fact, it's very important in any type of innovation, right? And I think Cyril said that very early, which is, and this is genesis of, agile methodology and things like that, right? Which is you have to be able to get to market not more than a year and a half into your journey, test it out, right? And in fact, the testing can happen even before, because there are lots of things not just related to technology, business models. How does the customer want to really consume the technology itself? How are they wanting to pay? What their budget cycles permit them to do? What ecosystem are you pulling in together to achieve that particular solution? What type of back-to-back relationship you have with all of these stakeholders? All that matters, and therefore our ability to get to market quickly is very, very important, I would say. Right. Let me stop there. I know we are running out of time. Let me see if Raghu or others want to add something to it.
Yeah. No, certainly. Thanks, Amit. Certainly, from my perspective, I think every product is getting connected and every product is getting smart. So we are in the services business. For us, how exactly can we help the customers with our differentiation to make a difference to them? That is what we have to look at it. So how do we really develop the talent, the right talent? Because if you really look at the connectivity is the core, whereas in your beginning address, you were saying, Ajay, that the TechM has 40% of the revenues coming from communication. And so communication is the core. If I can really use that to add value to the customer or develop talents in the area that the customer is looking for and support him, I think that is where the investment for us is compared to the products. Yeah, platforms and all that, we need to have the POCs to demonstrate our capabilities to the customer that yes, these people can do that. Certainly that is there. There is no doubt about it. But as a product company, like GE or any other product company looks at it and invests and then probably waits for the returns to come, I don't think we would do the same thing. It's more on talent to support the customers to move faster. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I heard some interesting point when Raghav, you were saying, and Amit, you were talking about, and Cyril, you were indicating earlier, and Jan as well, the fact that it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland, one of the quotations which comes from there, right? It says that just to remain at the same place today, you have to run as fast as you can, because the world around you is moving so fast. And if you really get ahead, you have to run twice as fast as your maximum speed, just to, if you want to make an edge. So your time to market, or the way you build an ecosystem and try to take it forward, obviously plays a big role. Okay, next question. There are tons of questions and I'm having a little trouble which one to pick, and there are some of the lengthy ones. I am going to skip the lengthy ones and maybe take the smaller one to begin with. So one simple question: what are some of the key technologies around which you are building your digital engineering strategies around? Open to anyone too.
Maybe I can take a stab at it very quickly. Look, there are many technology domains, but because of, especially in healthcare, because of all the virtualization and distribution of healthcare models, cloud becomes very important, and it's a good technology set. We talked a lot about data. Okay, data is like crude oil. Okay, the crude oil has very little value unless you really refine it. What a person wears is a cloth or a spectacle or a watch or whatever. These are all refined products out of the crude, essentially, if you really think about it, right? And the healthcare data is very similar to that. So every technology that goes into data refinement is extremely important at this point in time. In fact, now people are applying AI to sort of extract out the real sort of metadata out of the main data set itself, and then use that to further build AI. So AI for AI, all data refinement technologies, data visualization technologies, cloud, distributed sort of compute. There is a lot of work that's obviously going to happen on 5G and things like that. But a combination of AI, 5G, distributed compute is a very good combination as far as healthcare is concerned going forward.
Makes sense. Thanks, Amit, for that. I think that is self-explanatory in terms of how you articulate it now. Anyone else wants to add to this?
I think maybe just from my perspective, obviously in the audience that we've got today, there's a huge focus on CAD and PLM and modernizing the CAD and PLM suite and thinking about how do you feed real-time performance data into the design process. We at PTC obviously spend a lot of time on IoT technology and also thinking about use cases that involve tools like AI or augmented reality. And so those are all, as Amit said, pieces of the suite. Certainly there are cloud and other platform technologies that need to be taken into account here. But, I think making a way to get this data available in context in a workflow when needed and getting it out of these traps in the silos that exist in the enterprise and in the ecosystem is the critical piece here. So technology is obviously an enabler. There are some great technologies out there, but getting the right data in the right place at the right time is ultimately what you're trying to do.
Makes sense. Got you. So we're coming towards the end of our session as such. But if you were to give one message to the audience, or if you want to give one of the biggest game changer you believe would be there in a couple of years, especially focused around digital engineering, open to all of you to respond to that. And maybe Cyril, we can start with you. Any big ticket message?
I think AI is a game changer. I think applying AI all across the design to operation life cycle is a game changer in our industries, and that will be for me the immediate or next topic that collectively we should work on. And it's not just AI in industry in the classical scenario of predictive maintenance and others, but it's AI in generative design. When you design a process, it's AI for performance optimization or performance modeling. It's autonomous systems on the factory floor. It's AI on all those different dimensions, and how you engineer systems that are AI native, which I think is both challenging and extremely promising.
Gotcha. AI is going to be, and we are actually seeing it already disrupting the world in such a big way. And there are so many interesting scenarios and use cases potentially which will bring to the table. So we all as a team very, very excited. So thank you for that, Cyril. Raghav, would you like to go next?
Yeah, from my perspective, the convergence of technologies are bringing different kinds of options, possibilities. And the intersection of these technologies are the ones which really bring in, from my perspective, exponential innovation. And how can we really bring all this and then take the value to the customer? The core product, maybe the communication, connected engineering, and also the backend and provides lots of opportunities, and probably even brings down the barriers. So how do you really connect with the ecosystem to ensure that you bring the value into to the customer is what probably would be the I see in the next 2 years different kinds of, as I think Amit was talking about, different kinds of partnership evolving in these kinds of spaces to really move faster in a disruptive world, and then to take the lead and then stay ahead of others. So.
Thank you, Raghav. Thank you. Ian?
Yeah, maybe I would say ubiquitous connectivity. I think in a world where everything is connected and where you can generate insights based on usage patterns and how things are being used in the field, what's failing and what's succeeding, the ability to transform the business model away from a one-time transaction to create value over the course of the full customer lifecycle. And what does that unlock in terms of the value and the impact you can have both with and on behalf of your customers is incredibly powerful and a phenomenal strategy. So ubiquitous connectivity to me is what unlocks all of that.
Connectivity, yep, makes sense. Everything is getting connected and so much more to do, which is there. Absolutely. Amit?
No, in fact, I agree with everything that has been said, right? I mean, connectivity, our ability to bring together data and then use it for AI are major game changers, right? This is going to really, get more and more creative juices, flowing, but also solve some of the very tough problems, right? I would also say that, look, as you look at these technologies, it's very important to understand what problem are we solving. We can keep asking that question again and again and again, because otherwise can lose focus on, it can become a very technology focused orientation rather than a problem focused orientation. So,
correct.
And in every sector, there are many problems, and especially in healthcare, huge problems, right? Cost of healthcare is massive. Access, less than 50% of the people across the world have even access to basic healthcare even at this point in time. Okay. And unfortunately, with all the money, I think about $7-8 trillion of money being spent across the globe, the outcomes are still questionable. Okay. If you walk into the biggest and most advanced hospitals in the world today, the possibility that you may be misdiagnosed or on a wrong care pathway is somewhere between 3 to 13%, in spite of everything, right?
Wow.
And that's the magnitude of problem that you're looking at. So, and all of these things that Cyril talked about, Ian talked about in terms of, and Raghav was mentioning, in terms of connectivity and data and AI and digital can really help us move the needle right in the right direction.
I hear you. And I can't resist myself from making this comment, guys. You'll have to pardon me for that. But whatever all of you said, I also see a very underlining need from a security point of view, especially let's say if you go to your side of healthcare side of thing, patient information with the genomics coming into play, your wearables, imaging, and there's so many stakeholders involved where you're trying to get them access to information of which is patient critical, sometimes life-threatening, mission critical information. In wrong hands, it could really play a very, very kind of disastrous effect, which is there. Do you guys have any comments onto that?
No, it's a pretty hot topic in healthcare, obviously, right? Patient privacy and data privacy. But look, I think the world is going to move towards a patient consent mechanism, right, to a large extent across the board. We will need technologies which can get us the patient consent itself. But interestingly, there are also, I'm sure you come across technologies like confidential compute, right, which are also coming up pretty strongly, which fundamentally can give that confidence from a data privacy perspective to the end customer or the end consumer, okay, or even the data producer. So I think we have to. It is a very important concept. In every vertical you're seeing, as more digitization happens, there is always a bigger threat of cyber. Okay, healthcare is no different. We have to keep that in mind and make sure that it is, we build systems which are inherently protected. That should not become a barrier for innovation, right? It's something that you have to solve on the way, but keep the focus on what you're actually solving for, right? Which is very, very important. but do it in a way that we can inherently secure the entire sort of system in the process.
Got you. No, very well said. Thank you for your point of view. Anyone has any last comments on the same topic or anything else you like to bring up?
So from my perspective, I think 10, 15 years ago, we never thought that the banking on the net is secure. Now we feel that it is secure, right? I mean, similarly in vehicles, we never thought that the robot driving the vehicle is safe, but we think that now it is possible. So I think in the this cyber thing has started now. I think it's going to mature and make sure that it is going to be safe. That's what I feel that the future is going to be when it comes to security part of it. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right, Raghav. And it reminds me, I have seen a lot of Fortune banks have started making comments. A couple of years back, I remember ING Bank CEO made a comment. He said that we are actually a digital company and just happen to be in the banking business. Now, this is a big statement which comes across in terms of a CEO of an organization which is known for banking, making those kind of comments. So to your point, Raghav, yes, like you rightly said earlier, we never saw that we thought that whether it's going to be safe at all. But with so much of emphasis and the way the market's moving and everything, everybody's getting aligned. And like Amit was saying earlier, we have to look at what business problem we're solving and not hold it back just because we see a potential problem somewhere. We have to take care of that. So dot and target. Thank you. Cyril, you trying to say something?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. Okay. Ian, anything from you?
No, I agree with everything that was said. I thought it was summarized nicely. I think security, privacy, and then the ethical handling of data are the critical issues here.
Yeah. Just because you could do it doesn't mean that you should do it. So, and data ethical angle, thank you for bringing that point up. So, guys, what I'll do is, on behalf of you, I take the commitment to give to everybody who's listening, because there are so many questions which I've come across, and I'm scrolling the chat window. It becomes a little difficult to do justice in the time slot which we have. But maybe I'll come back to you offline and see if we can get back those responses to the people who asked those questions and take it forward. On that note, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your time and valuable insights which you provide. And hopefully, people have gotten tons and tons of learning from here. And we all as a team going to make a good positive impact in the ecosystem. So thank you once again.
Thanks, Ajay.
Thanks, Ajay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, guys. Thank you once again.
Bye-bye.